this marble is relatively thin, and I'm going to be thinning it out extremely thin at the very end. It's going to be very, very fragile in the center. Basically, almost as thin as a china plate. It won't be quite that thin, but it'll be close. It'll be 1/4 of an inch, so it's don't have anything to represent the thickness, but it'll be about the thickness of the shaft of this chisel. As I get closer to the backside, I'm easing off on the size of the chisels, and I'll end up going in with light mallets to do the final shaping. Between that and just coarse sandpaper or rubstones. So it's just to kind of explain what it is that I'm doing and why I'm approaching it the way that I am. It's a lot different than if you're going into shaping a thicker piece and it wasn't going to be quite so delicate. Then you could really come down on it relatively forceful without having to worry about the consequences. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just finishing off this transition, which is an important one because I'm going to drop this back in depth eventually, but I want to save this until I'm ready, because whenever you're taking measurements for depths, you want to maintain an original bed or surface to take all of your readings off. So you always want to maintain your reference point, and on top of that, this is also my center point for when I use the compass. So I want to do that last. I'll shape the outside here first. But so I want everything else done around it first before this will be the last thing that I do in shaping of the marble. Because once that reference point is gone, then I lose my center point and I'll have to reestablish. So I'm just, finishing off the transition, making it more consistent. One of the nice things about doing your own projects is you are the designer and the client and the creator all in one. So even when you have a failure or a mistake, it's a learning experience. And I'll tell you, the best lessons are mistakes, hands down. This is the continuation. As you can see, I spent some time over the last couple of days when I had a few minutes here and a few minutes there to just smooth this out. So the way I just smoothed it out was I just um, finished it off with a claw tool that I put together. It's big, actually it's just a modified, it's an old bullnose. It used to look like this one right here. And I ground that down and then toothed it. And so I just used this in a scraping motion to smooth out the chisel marks. And I used a rub stone to kind of rub stones are used for tightening up the surface after chisel work, and it just kind of brings everything into conformity. That's like whoo, jumping off the cliff there. But getting back on the topic, so this is where I'm at with this now. And then after that I just finished it off with a bit of sandpaper, and this is just a coarse piece of an old sanding belt, a belt sander. Okay, so I'm doing the next stage now, which is it's going to be I'm going to start out with a shallow chamfer. It just establishes this line, which is this inner line here. I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's a line here running around that's roughly about 1/8 of an inch. And eventually it's going to taper back from, I'm not sure if you can see the scriber line here or not, but there's a scriber line running right around the perimeter. Let me see if I can get that. Can you see that? Maybe. Scriber line running right here. And that, so that it's going to descend on a plane from this point to the inner line. If that makes any sense. So that's the chamfer is just establishing. It's going to be a rough chamfer all the way around, and then I'm going to connect from this line to that line, and flatten it out there. So it's going to be a nice, gradual, flattened taper. Okay. So I'm just using this heavier chisel to drop the waste. It's not it doesn't have to be a super fancy line. This is actually the very first chisel I ever made. So it's got a sentimental meaning for me. It's the very first chisel that I tried out on the forge many years ago. I keep it around for posterity. Plus, it's a nice tool. It's a great sense of achievement, the first chisel that you forge. It's a very spiritual experience, molding iron with fire. You get to know an awful lot about yourself. And they say that in an apprenticeship, a lot of issues can be hammered out on the forge. I think there's a lot of truth behind that. In fact, a lot of people often forget that most old carving was done around different lighting conditions. When you think about an interior space in an old house that was done more than a couple hundred years ago, it was done with the intention to harness candle and firelight, which is when the times that most people would be socializing and enjoying them would be done after dark. That's when the pieces were really designed to shine, to be enjoyed. And it's remarkable to see the mastery of a true carver under the dance of firelight. It actually brings the carving alive as the light plays, bounces in behind and forwards, slows down, speeds up around the objects that are carved. With the intensity of our modern lights, we often lose that experience. And in some ways, the carvings are never seen the way that they were intended to be seen. Anybody that's looking to set themselves up with tools, I highly recommend checking out antique shops, especially if you're in Europe, because of course the antique shops are so much better. Here, unfortunately, over the last 20 years, a lot of the antique shops have gone out of business as young people aren't buying antiques like they once did. And it's getting harder to find. But if you can find a good antique shop, check it out. Keep an eye out for the tools. I picked out these dividers. Actually, I bought them at I don't remember. I think it was at a pawn shop, if I'm not mistaken. I absolutely love them, and they've served me well. They're not overly big, but they, again, you can do something like a 16-inch circle quite easily with them. So it's they serve their purpose very well. And I always prefer to see old tools used and loved than just hung up on the wall. I think that it's a sad thing to see whenever you see perfectly good tools that have been deemed to be no longer relevant, because a lot of tools are. And the best way to keep a tool in good working order is to use it. But nothing was as truly liberating as when I was introduced to the forge. That just connected all the dots. The idea of being able to make your own tools is just so awesome. Just before I started making this circle, this disc, I had this. It was formerly a chisel and the tip snapped off, and I had made a kind of a crude punch, but I figured, well, I needed a small punch, and I couldn't find. We have other small punches, but I couldn't find them. So I put this to the grinder, and once you put a chisel to a grinder, it loses all temper, so it just becomes raw steel. So we heat the shop with a propane site heater, or propane. We call them salamanders here. Yeah, so I just cranked the salamander up and grabbed some forge tongs and put it in the propane fire, and was able to give this a mild temper. It's not super hard. You wouldn't be able to get very long out of this with anything harder than, say, marble. But it did the job, and it was fast. And that's what I mean, that making your own tools, you can't compare it to anything else. The ability to just simply have a need, you have the stock on hand, and you do it. It really is the only way to make any sense out of having custom tools. So I just wanted to use that as an example of the efficiency of knowing what you need and just doing it. Just wanted to finish this video off and express my appreciation for all of anybody who's been following me up to this point, for your support. It's much appreciated, and I'm glad that you're sticking with me, and I'm glad to be able to share what I do, and I'm glad that other people find interest in it. So yeah, just before I sign this video off, I just wanted to mention yesterday, after I'd filmed the video that you've watched up to this point, I'd continued working on this, and after the chamfer, I continued to reduce this I don't know what you call it, a margin or shoulder of the disc, and we've been using the claw tool that I showed you earlier. Yeah, so I've just been using it in a dragging motion, so without a hammer or a mallet, and it's really quite an effective tool. That's the nice thing about marble, is that it actually takes to files and scraping of chisels quite nicely. So it's a very effective technique to reduce light waste without digging too deep and without leaving stun marks. It's a very controlled way, and you just scrape off in opposite directions, and it's basically like using a rasp, only in the form of a chisel. So I just wanted to mention that, and then afterwards I use this this wide carbide chisel, which is actually a pneumatic chisel, but I often end up using this as a scraper since it's got a nice girth. And so yeah, so I've just been using that just to tighten up the surface, and I'm almost there. I've got a little bit more to work on this, but just wanted to finalize that update the what I've been up to, so that in the next video you're up to speed as to what I've been doing. And I wanted to say thank you. So see you next time.